Jingle bells, jingle bells.
Yeah.
This is the musical version of How to
I
CPCU.
I know. I just felt like our intro should have been like, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
Tony's not a chapter leader, but he is with us as always, which is fantastic. Welcome back, Heather, from your R&R. So hopefully you took a little, let me borrow a line from our earlier live cast today, a little self-care time. Hopefully that was good for you.
Yeah, for sure. A little self-care, probably a little self-destruction, But we just needed some time away, and so we found a place where we could go, and it was quiet, it was secluded. There was barely anybody there, and it was a lot of sunshine.
That's good. That's good. You got to get that
Yeah.
vitamin D, right? The vitamin D is important.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I was told, because, we were safe and precautious. We did our COVID testing before we left, and we did COVID testing when we got back. But by the doctor, when we got back, he was like, oh, yeah. He's like, COVID isn't around in the sunshine very much because the rays of the sun seem to kill it off really good.
Yeah.
So,
I found I just bathed myself in vodka. That helps, right?
yeah. Distill.
So yeah, please. This is not a medical advice show. Do not take anything that we say as fact. I don't want to get this delisted or something.
No.
But so for anyone who is not familiar with this show, we're not a medical advice show. This is How to CPCU. This is a production of volunteers from the CPCU Society talking about all of the great positives and values and opportunities that are involved in the society, how it's structured, how it works, and how you can get involved and get the most value out of it. So a quick reminder, if you are watching live or if you watched a recorded version, like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, retweet, write the hyperlink on a paper airplane and throw it out your window and see if when someone finds it. Whoever can get value from this, please share it with them. We would love to have it broadcast out there for them. And a quick reminder, if you have any questions or comments for us, we take them live on air, as you've already seen. So that being said, what are we talking about this week, Heather?
We are talking about 2021, or in general, yearly chapter planning. It seems like so dry and boring, especially with that intro there, but it's not. It depends on the approach that you take to it and what your chapter needs. And it's probably, though, one of the most crucial pieces of making sure that your chapter is successful. Hey, Melissa, good to see you here.
Yep. No, most definitely. It does not have to be dry. Most certainly doesn't have to be dry. In fact, technically, you're starting with a clean slate, right? So you can make it whatever you want. I think that, thank God 2020 is coming to a close, okay? Or whoever you believe in. Thank goodness 2020 is coming to a close. 2021 gives us an opportunity to kind of deploy some of the things that we learned over the last year, right? So, I mean, we had to adapt and be innovative. We now need to find a way as chapters to take that and kind of translate it into what we're doing for 2021. So before we even kind of talk about the mechanics, are there certain things that you all did with your chapter, Heather, that you're going to now kind of deploy in 2021 a little bit more effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had to essentially convert from a all in person, every event, everybody around each other all the time style chapter, and pretty traditional style chapter meetings
Mm.
where people come and have a lunch and, sit down and listen to the speaker, have an interactive engagement, those types of things, to hey everybody, we're talking to you over computers now and we're going to do Zoom meetings,
Yep.
so there was some decisions that had to be made around that. Are we going to what platform are we going to use? Are we going to go with Zoom? What's the best option? And our chapter treasurer, which was crazy because he was the guy with the checkbook basically, so he was the one that was going to pay the bills for the Zoom account. He was like, okay, I'll take this on and I'll learn it. And of course, we had a little stumblings here and there,
Mhm.
trying to figure out and navigate the platform and everything. But what's great about the virtual environment is that we have had such incredible engagement from that. Like we had the largest turnout and show out at our I-Day that we have had in probably since the big Hawaii class,
Yeah.
and in 2016. And it's just been it because people have realized that, oh, I can do this from anywhere. I can do
Yeah.
this from my phone if I happen to be sitting in the car, and somebody's driving me somewhere, or if I'm, or I can just take some time away and hop onto the Zoom meeting and check it out.
Yeah.
And that's definitely the pivot point for us, is that we've realized that now we've got to take that virtual piece, and when we do get to have that in-person piece again, which I know I'm probably hinting at some stuff we may be talking about next year, that hybrid approach is what we're
Yeah.
going to have to look at. And how do we accomplish that and make it effective for everyone,
Yeah.
no matter how they want to interact with the chapter.
Oh
So,
yeah, yeah. So before I get on to your little kind of like Easter egg that you included there, Tony wants to know if the place you went to is even quieter than Oklahoma.
oh my gosh. Well, let's just say it's a little south of the border.
um,
So,
so that makes sense.
yeah.
So, well, so that being said, you did include a little nugget or a little Easter egg there. Full disclosure, give you a little peek behind the curtain if you're watching. We did talk to Jen Polachek earlier today, actually, and we're going to be working with the society in early January to put together some webinars about, if you are a chapter that had some problems, or maybe you didn't even dip your toe in the water of doing virtual meetings and things like that. We're going to give you some really basic, easy, like get off the ground running really quickly with virtual meetings. I think it's probably going to end up being 2 webinars. So really trying to bring some value to the society members as this kind of like, virtual meeting 101. And yeah, the hybrid aspect of this is also going to be something that we're going to have to take the virtual piece and then obviously the in-person piece that we knew before, and then try and slam them together. Mike actually raises a really good point. Hybrid's going to allow us to have speakers from across the country and still end up having in person once that's a go. So we will end up covering that in kind of a dedicated episode, I think, in the near future. But that being said, yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think having to go from in-person meetings either only or is kind of the mainstay of what your chapter's doing, to now virtual being the mainstay. There was a lot of things that we had to learn. It was new platforms, it was new styles of communication, it was even how we interact with the people on virtual. So like a perfect example is, and this comes from more my home life. My wife teaches online, and the skill set of teaching online is completely different than the skill set of teaching in person. You use different types of you can't necessarily always use body language or the same types of body language. You have to kind of set the scenery up behind you so that it's like, at least, kind of setting the scene for whatever you're doing and things like that. So that applies to virtual meetings too. I've been to some virtual meetings where what was funny was like everyone kind of gets in the room at the beginning and just everyone's just sitting there kind of like with their head down doing their work. No one's talking or anything like that.
Yeah.
You still need to be a social butterfly and kind of like MC and have someone who's like, especially if it's like someone who's lurking and they haven't said anything or they haven't like included, you definitely have to kind of do that. But yeah, definitely some new skill sets that we can deploy that way. And we're going to be helping the society out with that. So let me ask you this. So for 2021 in your chapter, have you guys already been going through the planning process at this point for 2021?
Yeah, bits and pieces of it. Like, of course, we obviously do like our draft of our budget and everything for 2021, and make the plans around that. And that's a big responsibility that gets on the shoulders of the treasurer, because they're in charge of the checkbook once again. But they have to reach out to all of the committee chairs and then all of the directors that may be involved and say, hey, what are your thoughts about when your money is going to be spent and what it's going to be spent on, and what are your, and then we had to have collective discussions as well around, okay, well, we're going to be doing these virtual meetings, so there's money that gets shifted around from the cost of the in-person meetings to do other things with as well. And so we'll have, that was one of the big pieces, is the budgetary planning. And sometimes that feels like maybe that's all on the shoulders of just the treasurer, but really it's not. It's a collective process, and you have to be communicating with all the people who may be involved in setting up events or planning your I-Day or, your other networking socials and things like that. And they, just getting them to report back to you about what their thoughts are, but you have to provide them with the basis of information so they know what to do to tell you, what you need. So you give them a copy of the last year's budget and go, okay, look at last year. Let's see where your money was spent. And yeah, we're going to have to shift some things around, but just take that in mind. Is there anything additional that you want to do if you happen to have the resources for it? To be able to, provide some more opportunities for people to be able to engage in your chapter. So that's one piece of things that we have done. In the chapter that I'm in, obviously being really large, we have like a director of like the programs basically, and like that would be the director that would plan like chapter meetings. Well, she has a fairly extensive committee of people that take like one group kind of takes on one meeting for 1 month, and then it's less burden on her personal shoulders to have to do that, but she's kind of like the air traffic control and the coordinator of all of that. Well, everybody in the chat, everybody that's on the board, and we also reach out to our members via survey as well, provide her resources and contacts for speakers. And of course, because of this situation that we're in right now, and we have this virtual environment, our speaker platform has just been busted wide open. It's not, we got to get somebody to Bloomington, Illinois on this date, and flying into that airport isn't always so easy. But trying to figure out all of the logistics of those types of things have just been completely wiped off the plate. And it's, hey, can you show up for a Zoom meeting around this time? And people are like, sure, yeah, I could do that. So I think that that's one of the greatest things that has came out of this year, is we've been able to pivot and go, hey, that really great speaker that we never thought we could get, they just want to step right in and have a conversation with the chapter, because it's just another opportunity for their platform to be opened up, and gives us the opportunity to be able to see a much more diverse panel of people throughout the year and provide better experiences for the chapter members.
Oh, yeah. And 2020 certainly gave us some insight into that, where if we're shifting resources, we can shift some resources also in some cases to paid presenters that we normally wouldn't have been able to kind of get into the house, so to speak. So that's a really good point. Tony wanted to put into the conversation the fact that call center workers, right, really tough to get time off work. And so you can get some more engagement out of maybe members that are in your chapter, or folks that fell off the membership rolls because they worked in a call center or like some kind of remote service center that they couldn't necessarily get time to come to a physical meeting. That's a huge point right there. I think mechanically also, the question is always, all right, what does it look like, your process of kind of getting your heads together and putting the pieces in place for 2021 or for the next year, whatever that number looks like, right? So I think some of your events, you're going to have some mainstay dates that are put out there, right? With you being part of a jumbo chapter, you've got committees that are basically identifying those dates, and it's just a matter of kind of bringing it up to the broader leadership team, just being like, look, do you see any problems with these dates? If not, we'll kind of cordon this off. New Jersey's a little bit more of kind of like, even though we have like a ton of people, it operates almost like more like a mid-sized chapter where the leadership team all kind of, wears different hats and kind of pitches in wherever they can. And so what we typically do is we do at least one planning meeting. It's usually in person. Obviously this year that's going to be different. But one thing that we do, and I do want to interject like some tools and stuff like that into here as well. So this is called Doodle. I don't know if, if you've used Doodle before or not. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is get everyone to agree on a date and a time. Even when you use a tool like this, which by the way is completely free. Even when you use a tool like this, there's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 people that just can't make it. But you know what? You try and hit the date and time that works best for as many people as possible. And this is a really nice tool. Shoots out an email. I wish I had a live example of it, but you have 10 time slots and people can give like a thumbs up, thumbs down, or a, it depends for each one of those time slots. And you can kind of figure out, what works as far as getting together. Do you guys have one single meeting where you kind of lay things out, or is it like an ongoing process? Like, I think what we do is we typically lay out probably the first 6 months, and then the second 6 months of the year, we'll reserve dates, but we won't necessarily work on the particulars until closer to like the half year mark. How do you guys kind of lay it out?
We try to keep the calendar fairly static, moving our chapter meeting dates in between like Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, because they tend to be the less heavy days for people in their schedules. And
you alternate morning, lunch, afternoon?
Yeah,
Like
and we base that a lot of times on the speaker availability. Of course, that availability is a little bit more open now than it used to be, because people can work things around what our timing and everything is. We try to we sit down it's generally November that we sit down and we kind of look at the calendar. And we go, okay, we need to get these dates out there. And like, we just sent a save the date kind of email to all of our chapter members. And we use the email platform Constant Contact, which isn't my favorite, honestly, but it's what we have. Yeah. But it allows the registration processes and everything for our chapter meetings. And we send that out to the members before the year even starts. And then we do it for the first 6 months of the year. We have the other dates penciled in, because we generally have our I-Day in November, obviously, and you have a diversity meeting, it's generally in October is whenever we have that. So we try to plan around those things, and we just kind of lay the dates into the calendar. The dates from, July through December tend to be a little bit more flexible, only because we want to make sure that our chapter members are aware of what's going to be happening at least for the first 6 months of the year, so that they can just lay a placeholder on the calendar and say, I'll get more information. We don't have speakers, or we didn't even have our speaker when we sent out our January, our invite for the save the date stuff. So we just said, put this on your calendar so and you're aware and can make sure that you block the time if you want to attend. So those are the types of things that we do. We also do. Of course, we have like an executive board, that's the president, the past president, the treasurer, and the secretary. When it comes to planning, like we actually have like pre-planning meetings for our board meetings that we have monthly. So our plan. We plan to plan, which I know seems a little archaic, but it actually helps us because we can really like build out the agenda and so that it's very much prepared for what's going to happen during the board meeting. Being the secretary last year, it was my responsibility to build that agenda. So, we had a template that we utilized and everything, and then you just transfer you take the minutes on the agenda. So we have our minutes kind of collected for the board meetings and everything for that as well. But we take that and, I would always reach out to all of the directors and the committee chairs, and I would say, hey, is there anything that you need to be discussed during the board meeting? And our board meetings are open to everyone. We allow them to come in, and we invite people at certain times to come in as well, because like we want people to come back and have a discussion about how did I-Day go, or how did the symposium go, because we have a symposium with the local college in town too. And just to do those feedback, and we'll bring in guest people as well to talk about particular topics that need to be brought in front of the board to make decisions, the decision making that needs to be done. So I guess I can say that our planning happens throughout the year. And we do that through our board meetings. And then we have like at I-Day every year, we have like our annual business meeting with the chapter themselves. It's always, like 15 minutes after I-Day. Now, what's really funny about that is whenever it was in person, a lot of people go, I'm done. I'm out here. I'm not. But we have to have a quorum, a certain number of people attending for that. So we have them. We'd have that this year, like everybody stayed for the business meeting because it was virtual, and they could just hang on and, kind of talk about what's going on in the chapter, the recognition and everything happens during that time too. So, but budgetary planning is a big piece of what our chapter planning is about, just planning out the money that we have to spend, and then planning out the programs and activities, and all of that is also part of it. But once again, we have that group of people that, they're the researchers. They go out and they find the people, they solicit them, they get them to be a part of our chapter meetings. And then we also have like our social committee that deals with all of like the networking events and the fun stuff. I mean, we've done a lot of really cool, fun things in the chapter, and we're actually tagging on to you guys because we decided to plan a local brewery tour virtually.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
And we're setting up a little package deal with one of the local liquor stores that they can get like the craft, because Bloomington has a ton of craft breweries, which is weird that they're in the middle of this cornfield and they have the craft breweries there. But everybody loves all the craft breweries. So we're going to have the local liquor store set up. That's going to be like one of our very first virtual true networking events, like totally dedicated to just hanging out and networking. Because we did find that was harder to schedule, because we did find that our chapter members were like, look, we're just tired of being on the computer all day long. Well, now everybody's kind of gotten adjusted to that. And we felt, we kind of got some survey results that said, hey, we'd just like to get together and just chat for a while and hang out. And so we're going to have somebody actually do the tour through the breweries for us and everything. And it's just one of our chapter members that has a lot of knowledge about those. And he's just going to talk people through, the packages that we're going to do. So that's just an engagement piece that we're looking at, just to pivot into that virtual world. We have like lots of chapter planning documents and things like that we utilize, have just been passed down through the ages. I know that on the CPCU Society site, there are some chapter planning resources as well, if you're looking for ways to be able to do that, and have a structure around it too.
Yes, anyone who is a chapter leader, you can go on the CPCU Society website, and under I think if you go under your profile and then you pick
your account,
I might have to do a little web surfing as we kind of go through this to find it, but there'll be like a chapter resources or chapter leader resources tab that you can go to that kind of lays some of that stuff out. It also talks about how you structure your chapter and things like that, which we've kind of talked a little bit about in prior episodes. But so I also wanted to kind of share this. So it sounds like you're creating the skeleton at the beginning of the year, and then you're filling out the skeleton as you move along throughout the year, which I love, because plans change and dates sometimes need to move around and things like that. But as long as the membership has a reasonable expectation of there'll be a meeting approximately around this date, you're then able to kind of fill in the gaps a little bit. We do something similar in New Jersey. We might even get a little bit more specific. Like I said, the first 6 months, and then the second 6 months are a little bit more like you're doing with kind of like the skeleton and whatnot. But so this is like, so for us, again, our kind of members wear a lot of hats, but so this was my agenda that we put together for December of 18. So this was planning 2019. That was the second and final year I was chapter president for New Jersey chapter. And typically the chapter president is the one who's putting the agenda together. And then, we'll solicit some feedback from others in terms of special issues that need to be addressed or whatever during the meeting. But, really simply, I don't know how, hopefully this is decently legible for people that are watching in on the live cast. But so, basic intro, we always do a look back. Okay. So we're always going to look back at events that worked well, events that didn't work so well. We had some events that we tried for like 2-3 years. They just didn't get any traction. We said, you know what, we'll let those go by the wayside. There's some good opportunity for 2021 to do that look back. And any of those events that weren't doing well before this, okay, probably aren't going to miraculously get better. Okay. If anything, they'll get worse. So don't be afraid. Like, just because you did it every single year for 10 years, if it's pretty universal that it's like, oh, we have to do this again this year, don't do it. I mean, if there's no enthusiasm behind it, nothing says that you have to do that every single year, right? Like, I think a lot of us get bogged down by tradition sometimes. And so if, we had a golf event that we started like 2 or 3 years ago, it was like a little kind of, we would do like a mini lesson. It wasn't even like, we wouldn't even play any holes. It was like a mini lesson just for beginners. And it never really got off the ground. We would get the same 5 or 6 people, and there wasn't just like a lot of bang for our buck there. So you look back at the ones that worked, the ones that didn't work. If it's one, that's brand new, it was the first year you ran it, you're obviously talking about, okay, how do we improve it and make it better? We talk about kind of goals. So like, goal setting is another important part of this. It's part of your certificate of excellence, your circle of excellence. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, you need to set those goals, and some of those goals now are being given to chapter leaders by the governors. So the governors actually had to look at, what retention numbers look good and engagement numbers look good for each one of their chapters that they're working with. But I always put into place other types of goals too, right? So it's the idea of SMART goals. It's goals that have to do with performance are good, and then goals that have to do with activity, right? So you want some kind of blending of both of those. And so we would make sure to talk about what goals we had. Obviously before this, actually kind of in the planning to plan step of it, and I think you might do some of this too. Do you guys kind of go through the chapter roster and be like, look, who are the people that we want to tap on the shoulder to specifically invite into the room? Because if they decide to get involved, they're going to be really productive. Do you guys kind of go through that process?
Yeah, we do. That process is almost, it's dedicated to a chapter director most of the time. Like, we have a membership director, and that person is kind of like the coordinator and the person that reaches out to anybody that's interested. But we do have a conversation in our board meeting. Generally, we're looking like September, October most of the time, just to try to see and fill out people's availability and everything to take on a role within the chapter. Sometimes that has to be done on the fly, though, because you have people that move, or people that go to a different area. And we had to do that this year. And honestly, we got in a position where we didn't have anyone who could step up. But what's great about having a larger chapter is helpful is that we have a couple of positions called director at large. And that director at large position if someone leaves out of the board during that year, the director at large is generally the person that's going to fill that role, is going to step into that role. So it's almost like it's like that vacancy post, but it's also a great learning opportunity for somebody that wants to come in and be a part of the board and just
Yeah.
kind of, you can be a silent partner for a year and be able to see everything if no one leaves. But if there's a particular event that somebody needs to step up and plan or be a part of or coordinate, and there's
Yeah.
no one within a committee or no one within a group that can do that, that's what the director at large gets to be a part of. So they kind of get that flavor of all the pieces of what the chapter can do, and
Yeah.
it truly is kind of a learning role. I almost like to call it like a junior director role, because they end up, kind of interning on the board and learning a whole lot in the process. So
Well, you're
yeah.
basically developing a bench, right? Like
Mhm.
you have a bench that you can immediately call up, or like,
Yeah.
a minor league team, but they're not separated. They're actually still involved in the process, which is
Mhm.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, some chapters don't have enough resources to that level, but I think the same premise still applies. If you can get anyone in the door to help just a little bit, whether it's the planning process or the execution process of like an event or an activity or something like that, get them in and get them involved, even if it's something as simple as like checking people in at the front, or whatever it is, right? Give them a small role to help out with, because that becomes the conduit, like you said, where now they are kind of like that at-large person where you can then tap them on the shoulder and be like, hey, we have a really serious need here. We know you've been involved before, please see if you can slot in and kind of take over. And a lot of them, if they've been involved, even in a small way, they're more inclined to say yes. But yeah, no, that's fantastic. I think we go through kind of some of that process. Um, it's not as formalized, but we're definitely like, we take all of these different positions, and in some years, some of them go vacant. We just don't have enough bodies to fill all of those. We make sure the main ones are filled, and then we triage, right? So it's basically like a ABC, or like a green light, yellow light, red light, right? The red light is the ones that we don't necessarily have to have. They're just something that is something that would be nice to have. And then the other two we're trying to actively fill, and we're always trying to invite people into the meetings that aren't technically chapter leaders, so that they can get a sense of how we kind of conduct business. You'll see other things on here, like obviously Circle of Excellence reporting is an important thing. Getting the Circle of Excellence report in from the prior year, making sure to get all your credit for everything that you're doing, and then also making a part of the planning process. Again, I'm a big believer in, you don't just check boxes to check boxes. Okay. If you're going to do it, do it. Right. So if it's, there's an ethics requirement, and there's some D&I stuff and things like that in the Circle of Excellence, don't just do it to say that you check mark the box. Don't half-ass it. Okay. Figure something out. And if the idea that you come up with, there's no like juice behind it, right? It doesn't really get people going, then find a different solution. Again, don't
Yeah.
be, burdened or kind of like, stuck with what you do every single year, if what you do every single year doesn't really amount to a ton of ROI, right? I was always big on vision. I don't know if this really, there's no way to really kind of calculate whether this helps or not, but I'm a big believer in vision, right? So chapters typically have a culture, and there's some core to the culture, and then there's some ebbs and flows depending on who's involved in the leadership team and whatnot. I was a big believer in like, look, this is kind of what I envision for the future. Let's talk about it. Does it make sense for you? Do you think any of it is a little bit too ambitious? Is it not ambitious enough? Talk about that vision at a really high level. Yours being a jumbo chapter, does it ebb and flow that much, or is it pretty much kind of like I mean, you kind of got the Titanic of chapters. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, I wouldn't say that it ebb and flows as much as like mid-size and smaller chapters would. It definitely we had to ebb and flow this year though. I
Mhm,
mean,
mhm.
we just had to figure out ways to adjust and adapt in the situation that we were in. And I think what helped us was the fact that we did have such a really good tight structure around what needed to get accomplished in the year,
Yeah.
so that and everybody has really good defined roles. In larger chapters, that's super important,
Mm,
mainly because um, not that people can't step across roles, and do other things. If a need comes up and somebody can't do something or can't lead a meeting or can't do something, then everybody's willing to step in and do what's needed. But because most of the time it's pretty static, having those clearly defined roles and responsibilities helps to helps everyone to know, okay, this is what I've got. This is what my goals that I have to accomplish this year.
mhm.
Program director, I have to make sure that I have all the meetings planned, the speakers contacted in a timely manner, all the communication to the communicator in the chapter that deals with sending out the emails and everything. That that's a huge coordination role. So that person knows, though, I'm involved in the conversations that are on the board, but here's what I bring to the table, and I can report back to the board about what is going on in my space.
Yeah.
Not that we can't play in each other's sandboxes, like I said, because I probably drove our program director crazy, because I'm like, hey, you need to call this guy and you need to
Yeah.
call this guy, and because I know that our book is like wide open with speakers now. I'm like, let's get Mike Casalni to come in and talk. Let's get, Rob Galbraith to come in and talk. Let's reach out to everybody, because there seems to be such an openness and willingness, especially among the CPCU community. And you will see this if you're willing to kind of just step out of that norm,
Yeah.
um, that people want to be a part of what's going on in your chapter, because it keeps them connected to the whole framework and the whole synergy of the CPCU community.
Oh
So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And to your point, there's also there's an opportunity there when I look, not everything is going to go as planned, and it's really important that you understand, or that everyone in the leadership understands, that there's going to be moments in time where you kind of like, raise the red flag, or ring the bell, and it's an all hands on deck kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
look, this, either a deadline is upcoming and we're just, moving slowly toward it and we need to make up more time, or, something explodes and now we need to kind of fix it and come up with another alternative pretty quickly. So that's also a big component of it. I would say anyone who's part of like a chapter that doesn't have as many kind of like specific roles, but it's more of kind of like a leadership by committee type of situation. One thing I always found important was at the end of any meeting, okay, but specifically in terms of your planning meeting or meetings, have some quantifiable specific action items at the end of them. Okay. So, for you guys, you might have like, okay, this person is the program director. They have to, arrange 6 dates and make sure that we at least are keyed in on a handful of presenters and things like that. If you don't have someone who specifically has some kind of like, extremely defined role, but they volunteer to say like, I'll help out with this, give them some action steps or give them some deliverables, and make sure to verify those at the next, couple of meetings. What I've also noticed from my time as not a president and my time as president of a chapter is it's all about momentum.
Yeah.
If the earlier you get going and the more consistent you are with your planning process for the next year, the better the next year is going to be. Because if you get behind the 8 ball early on in the year, it's just you're playing catch up the whole time, and you're never going to get out ahead of it. And so it's very much a momentum thing. Like, start early, start often, and just be really consistent with it in terms of kind of like trying to move the ball consistently down the field. Get to the next event, get to the next thing, get to the next initiative, and really kind of move the ball forward that way. Um,
And
go ahead, go ahead.
one thing that we do, Matt, with our meeting minutes that come out after a board meeting, we have we have action steps out of each one of those that are from each of the agenda items. And what I just started to do so that it would help to remind people, because, nobody really wants to click into the document a lot of times to read through these minutes, even though I'm pretty short on my notes and everything. I get enough information that people are able to understand. I don't truly shorthand them, but I would put those action steps actually in the body of the email that I would send out with the meeting minutes and say, Michelle, blah, 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 blah. This is your responsibility. Ken, blah, 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 blah. This is this is what needs to be done by the next chapter or next board meeting.
Yep.
And just that regular open communication as well is super important too. Making sure that people stay in the know, even if they can't attend a board meeting for whatever reason at all. Keeping them updated on what's going on, and that's a pivotal piece of the secretary role in our chapter, is that you kind of have to be that central point of communication to all of your boards, so that they understand, what's next, what are we planning, what do we have to do, what was the report out from this particular board meeting. And we also do some really good in our planning that we do. We actually reflect back, because typically our chapter meetings for the members are tied really close in date to the board meeting for that month. They're either on the same day or they're close in a few days afterwards. So what we would do is we always reflect back and spend time talking about like some feedback that happened during that meeting, and ask for that anecdotal feedback pretty quickly from the chapter members as well. And then we go, okay, yeah, this went really well, or no, this actually did not go so well. And what can we do to make it better the next time around? And that's all captured within our meeting minutes as well. And action items typically come out of that most of the time.
That's an important piece to plan to get feedback, right? Like, definitely include it in your planning process, right? So like when we set up our I-Day, we know at the tail end of I-Day, we're sending out a survey to everyone who attended. Okay, regardless of the year and whether it's in person or virtual or whatever, we're sending out a survey, and we're also throwing a little incentive behind it. Like, fill out the survey, help us with some feedback, and we'll put you into a drawing for, a $50 gift card. And we give out like 2 or 3 of them, depending on, how big the event is and what money's involved. But I think the feedback thing is key, right? Like, some chapters do an annual member survey. Big thumbs up to that. In your planning meeting, go over those results. Okay. And also maybe look at them year over year. How have they changed? Is, your 2018, 2019, and 2020, are you pretty much consistent? Are you trending up, trending down? See what those results are kind of giving, what conclusion that's leading you to make as a result of the chapter activities.
And one thing I would point out too, like the society did their little, they did their survey this year, and it was really, it was so insightful, because it provided us, like they called it the report card, I guess, whatever you want to call it, but it provided us some context around the demographics of our group, which was like so eye-opening to us. We now see like we have a niche opportunity with a group that hasn't really been that engaged in the chapter, with like agents and brokers in our area. We know that there's tons of agents that have CPCU. Well,
we're like cockroaches. We're everywhere.
But like 2% of our chapter membership is actually an agent and broker. So it's like, wow, that's so eye-opening for us, because now we know, hey, if we offered a couple of opportunities for agents and brokers to get some CE credit with our chapter meetings, or offered a special opportunity for them, boom, we've got them in the door. And now we have that connection to a community that seems like maybe a little bit largely like absent from our chapter. We also recognize that, hey, there's an opportunity that we need to engage the younger generation as well. We have a pretty, mid-career, demographic in our group and everything. We also have a pretty significant piece that's going to be probably retiring pretty soon too as well. So it's like, guys, we gotta start moving the needle on how we get the younger generation involved in this. Otherwise, we're going to see some suffering in our numbers. So we really appreciated how eye-opening that particular report card was, and helped us to just be able to look at it from the perspective of, yeah, they might have not rated us that great with this, but that's an opportunity for us to be able to improve and everything, and making sure that we're offering the things that our chapter members really want from
Oh yeah.
us. So
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we covered. We kind of hit on it. If you didn't see it, we hit on it with a prior episode where we talked about kind of chapter engagement. You need to create the chapter that your members want, right? It's all well and good if you're happy, but your engagement may suffer if all you're doing is kind of making decisions from your perspective, right? You have to solicit feedback. There's also, I forget the specific term for it, but there's a statistical phenomenon where you also have to be mindful of your blind spots as well. So, like for instance, some things you will get biased responses from because the people that are most likely to fill out the survey are people that had a good time or are approving or have a positive experience. So you need to also strategically put into place some things that are checks on that. So a perfect example would be, my first year as chapter president. I tried to legitimately at least make one phone contact with every single member. If I had a valid phone number for them, at the very least, I left a voicemail, right? Just to try and reach out and be like, look, this is the person that currently is kind of like working at the head of the chapter as one of the main leaders. They are reaching out to try and find out, are you having a good time? Are you seeing value? Where are we falling short? That kind of thing. So also remember that, like, a survey is fantastic. It's going to give you really good insight. And you're right. Like, only having 2% of agents and brokers, or even if it's only 10%, I think almost half of the entire industry is agent and broker. Okay. So you have to remember that is a huge percentage to not have engaged or not have active in what's going on. So, another good thing would be all those agents and brokers that maybe either don't have their CPCU or they do and they're not chapter members. Don't approach them and be like, hey, why don't you become a chapter member? Legit, just ask them and say, look, this isn't a sales pitch. I'm not trying to get you to become a dues paying member. I would like to find out what you're thinking or what you see in terms of the value proposition, whether it's there or it's not, and how that goes into your decision-making process. I think the other angle that we have to remember here is the environment is just going to get more competitive for, competing professional associations.
yeah,
Right. So the chapter and broker thing makes me think about the fact that like the Big I and PIA and some of these other, and even RIMS, okay, probably have a larger percentage of agents and brokers in them than the CPCU society. That's your competition, right? If you're
yep.
a chapter leader, you're trying to engage those people that might be getting other types of engagement in other professional associations. So you have to remember that. And you know what? See what they do well and rip it off if you have to. I mean, they don't have a copyright on, activity. So if there's something that you can include from some other professional association, I think that's also a good well to draw from. Am I off base on that one?
Thievery is the best form of flattery. That's
Yeah.
all I gotta say. So, I am all for like looking for the opportunities that you can best engage your chapter in new and different ways.
Mm,
It is, when I came into my chapter, we didn't have a ton of social media presence. It was there, it was never used.
yeah.
Now we use it all the time, because we wanted to offer that other level of engagement for chapter members to be able to find out information and to be able to just be a part of something that seems almost amorphous to them at times. It's kind of like, yeah, I'm a CPCU, but what does that really mean to me? What do I get out of it? What's in it for me? And really helping your members to understand the value of what it can bring to them, even if it's just like, okay, we're going to offer 2 events that are really, underwriting heavy focused, and we're going to offer a couple events that are like really claims heavy focused, and then we're going to offer some talk around risk management and resilience and resilient construction, and then we got to make sure that we have something that is more geared towards what our actuary audience would want to look at as well. So just being intentional about that type of planning is super important to your chapter's engagement. And it's not as hard and as complicated as it really sounds,
Yeah.
And it can be, like I said, that ebb and flow process, or it can be incredibly structured. It kind of depends on how your chapter is designed and structured as a group. But knowing your chapter is the biggest piece of that. You're a salesman, Matt. You got to got to know your target audience, right?
Oh yeah.
And you have to make sure that whatever you're offering meets their needs, and meets what they want to get out of being a part of your chapter. So, another thing that we've really tried to focus on in this past year is also our chapter before has not pushed society events as much as we have this year, because there's just that whole other level of engagement whenever you decide to hop into an IG Roadshow, or you decide to, check out these webinars that are available to you from the society. I know the society pushes that, but if it's also like advertised and we just talk about it in our chapter meeting, like, hey guys, did you know that there's this really cool thing coming up for new designees that's really specifically geared for them? You want to get, if you're a new designee in this meeting right now, hop on this and find out a little bit more about that other level that's involved in the CPCU society. So we've really tried very hard to build engagement around those types of things as well, and actually kind of made it a core piece of how we're going to plan out in 2021 too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And the other thing the other point I would make is, if you end up watching this or hearing this and you're part of a smaller chapter, do a couple things well, okay, as opposed to a bunch of stuff mediocre. If your choice is between the volume activity or the volume of activities or the quality, take quality over quantity when it comes to this organization and the people that are part of your chapter. So say you're, a micro chapter or a small chapter, and you only have, 15, 20, 30 members. Okay. If that's the case, just figure out like 2 events every year. And again, don't just check boxes to check boxes, right? So if you have to have an ethics event every year and there needs to be a diversity component or something like that, dude, check as many boxes as you can with that one event, but make it a fantastic event, as opposed to doing 3 events and each one of them gets 4 people. Okay. Yeah. That is always going to be a much better value proposition. And to your point, Heather, I think the value argument here is extremely important, right? Whether it's the current members or the members that you're looking to re-engage or attract that maybe were former, CPCU members or they're prospective new CPCUs in the future. The value argument is a big one, and a huge component of that is expectation and knowing your audience, right? So if their expectation is X and you give them Y, they're not going to be happy. It's just not going to happen. And so that's a huge component of it. I think so. Some of the other elements here, I think, also have to do with kind of like the actual execution of what you're doing throughout the year. Okay. You need to continually check back and be like, don't just wait for the end of the year. Like if you had an event that was a dud, like do a postmortem. I love the fact that you said like your leadership meetings and your member meetings happen pretty close. While it's fresh in your memory, like have a powwow and just be like, look, why didn't this work? Or wow, that was amazing. What did we do different? And do it in the moment, because that can also give you the opportunity to pivot. So the last 2 or 3 events that you have for the remainder of the year, try and do that again and try and recreate the magic that you had and get that momentum going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one and another thing that, I know you talk about goals and vision and all of that. Here, the bottom line is, if you offer one event that your chapter members, like, if there's that one event that a chapter member wants to attend every year, even if it's just your golf event that you have in the summer or whatever, um, that's their thing. They're engaged. It's the
Yeah.
level of engagement that they want to have, but make sure that they are always aware of what is available for them to be involved in,
Yeah.
and to be a part of. They may look at a topic in a meeting and go, yeah, that's really probably not something that I'm going to want to attend or want to be a part of. But because they went to another meeting that they really liked and it was something that was really catered for them,
Yeah.
they might tell somebody that they know, hey, well, I know that you work over in this area of the company. This might be really super interesting to you.
Yeah.
And that's how your brand kind of gets developed, for your chapter, is just mainly by word of mouth. Because truly, we know that as volunteer leaders, it's all volunteer, and it's that
Mhm.
herding cats mentality, and you got to figure it all out as you go. But your chapter members, they're all volunteers too. they're
Yeah.
they're volunteering their time to come and be a part of the chapter, you know and yes, they do get a return on that investment for volunteering. They get their CE, they get good knowledge. They stay up to date with the newest things that are coming into the industry as well, but they're still a volunteer. They could
Mhm.
choose to not come. So that's why knowing who your chapter is, what they need, and planning around that accordingly is gonna what is really gonna make your chapter planning incredibly successful.
Yes, yeah, and to your point, to go back to your point about kind of like promoting the CPCU society things and the opportunities, that's another important thing there. Where maybe they only go to one of your events every single year, but if you can get them involved in an interest group, or if you can get them involved in some other committee or something like that that's happening around the society, okay, that that by kind of proxy increases what they feel about your chapter if you were that gateway to getting them there. So say they only come to one event every single year for the chapter, but they're going to, a bunch of IG leadership meetings or events during the year, they're going to come to equate those things pretty much all together, right?
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
and they're not going to necessarily compartmentalize that, too often. So that's something to remember. I think the other thing that, to harken back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, is pool resources with your other chapters that are around you. It can
yeah,
be just a informal relationship, or I mean, we've worked in the Northeast to really formalize that relationship, where we have about a half dozen chapters that are actively working to say, okay, you have a big event this month, we'll kind of back off and not do a big event to like compete with yours. What we'll do is actually actively cross promote what you're doing to try
mhm,
and get some of our chapters there, and give those chapter member prices, even if they're coming from another chapter,
yeah,
if you can, if you can. But yeah, like that's always an opportunity too. If you are short on manpower, but you have 2 or 3 other chapters that are in relatively close proximity to you, there is nothing wrong with you kind of reaching out and be like, hey, we can only really do one event a year for our members. Is there any way that we could cross promote, the 4 or 5 that you're doing, so that our members feel a little bit more engaged?
mhm,
And we've had a lot of success with that, where we have members showing up to our events in New Jersey from all throughout the country, and then vice versa, our members are going to other chapters events throughout the country as well. So, and again, they're going to equate that value proposition not necessarily to those other chapters. They're going to equate it to their home chapter, because you were the conduit or the gateway to kind of getting to those other things. Yeah. So really quickly, I did kind of hack the internet a little bit here, and so this is my profile page for the CPCU Society website. Mine looks a little bit different. I'm technically not a chapter leader at the moment. I am a governor. So mine looks a little bit different on the left-hand side. So you see like my chapters that I am kind of working with as a governor. And so it kind of links to those, home pages and whatnot. But if you are a chapter leader, there's actually some elements here. I think if you go to volunteer dashboard, oh, you know what? I might actually be able to get into the various dashboards here. But as a volunteer, you can go to the dashboard, and I think it'll direct take you to your chapter dashboard. And so if I look in here on New Jersey, assuming my internet connection works. There you go. So this is the New Jersey dashboard. It's giving you a breakdown of membership. It's going to tell you new members within the last 30 days. It's going to show you, standard paid lapse, new designees, things like that. There's also a number of other resources that you can get through, I believe most of the tabs up here on the top, that will get you to, some of those documents and kind of the structure of job descriptions as far as the roles that members in the chapter will have and things like that. So I think we can definitely do a little bit of a deeper dive on that maybe in a later episode. But we're going on an hour. I think when I leave here, I probably won't be back at my desk for a week. Hopefully, knock on wood. Hopefully, I won't have to be. But. Any final words, words of encouragement, words of advice, Heather, anything else that you would kind of throw out there in terms of, planning for a successful 2021?
I would just encourage everybody to have the courage to try one new crazy thing in your chapter next year. And something that you've never, ever thought that you would do before with your chapter. Because oftentimes just that little shakeup of doing one little thing slightly differently is really going to be that energy and that spark that your chapter needs to get going and get moving again. And then also, don't forget to watch your Christmas movies this week. I've been trying to binge on them because, Christmas spirit's been a little weird this year trying to get into it. So I watched Scrooge last night, which is my favorite Bill Murray Christmas movie. I watched Christmas Vacation. I'm going to be binging some Die Hard later. So those are my kind of Christmas movies.
You do consider Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Hey, the director came out and specifically said that film is a Christmas movie. So
I'll allow it. I'm non-discriminating when it comes to Christmas films, even if it has a remote kind of implication. I gotta tell you, my favorite. First of all, my last piece on the 2021 planning is, yes, do that. I think that's a fantastic, push the limits of your comfort zone, because you can find an aha moment that can completely positively change the path or the direction of your chapter. But so on the idea of Christmas movies, one of my favorite Christmas movies with my wife to watch is The Holiday, which is, rom-com-y kind of thing. And the other day, I was thinking out loud to her while we're watching. I was like, Christmas doesn't even really kind of appear that much in this movie, right? The amount of Christmas in the movie is 1%. Everything else is the relationships and stuff like that. So by that metric, if that is a Christmas movie, Die Hard's a Christmas movie. There's a Christmas tree, there's wrapping tape and stuff. It's a Christmas movie. I think that qualifies.
Absolutely.
I think they hit the quota. So yes, enjoy your Christmas movies. Are there any unconventional Christmas movies beyond Die Hard that's kind of a mainstay of yours? Or
oh gosh, well we actually dove in, and I think we got an AMC subscription on Prime or whatever, because it was free for 14 days or whatever. So we're gonna try to, because they had a bunch of Christmas movies on there. So we sat down the other night and we watched a Christmas movie that is incredibly unconventional. It's called A Christmas Horror Story.
Okay.
And we're thinking this is going to be B-movie cheesy. Turns out it really kind of was. But William Shatner is in this film. Okay.
Okay.
And he plays this radio host, basically, who's narrating this whole story in the background that makes absolutely no sense until you get to the end. Okay.
Okay.
It's hilarious. And we're just sitting there going, oh my goodness, I cannot believe what is happening in front of my eyes right now. But if you like a little touch of the horror movie genres and everything, A Christmas Horror Story, not for children, not for children.
Fair enough.
It is fantastic, and it will leave you just sitting at the end of the movie going, I'm going to have to watch that again.
I
Never thought I'd see William Shatner in a horror movie about Christmas.
you set them up. I'll knock them down. You took the words out of my mouth. There is an element of me that loves the campiness or the B moviness of Christmas horror films, because it is like everything cheesy about Christmas wrapped up with horror. So it's like, I mean, it's the ultimate sugar rush of B movie campiness and just kind of silliness sometimes that get thrown into those things. But like, I mean, like a movie like Krampus or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Where, it's basically like, don't watch with your kids because, last thing you want them to think is that Santa Claus is coming to kill them. But, but yes, any of those kind of like unconventional things too, I think are absolutely fantastic. So I think we're probably going to take a week off. So, every week we come at you at 5:30 on Wednesdays, but next week you will probably not see us. Unless I get a wild hair up my rear end and I just decide to pop on for like 10 or 15 minutes and talk about something. But, you'll get a text, Heather, if there is something where I'm like, oh, we got to talk about this, but probably not. So we will see you in the new year. Again, take some of these tips and pointers. If you're watching the recorded version or even the live version right now, make sure to throw some comments in or questions and we will get back to you. And we would love to hear how it turns out for you. And again, keep your eye out for early January 2021, those webinars from the society that we're going to be working with them on to really kind of like get moving with virtual and kind of like the new way that chapters can begin interacting with their members and really kind of getting them engaged. So Merry Christmas, happy holidays. And I guess I'll see you in 2021, Heather.
Peace out, Matt.